Our lesson of Scripture this morning comes to us from the second book of Kings, chapter 25, and I'll be reading verses 27 through 30. Hear now the reading of God's holy word. In the 37th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 27th day of the month, King Evil-Merodach of Babylon, in the year that he began to reign, released King Jehoiakim of Judah from prison. He spoke kindly to him and gave him a seat above the other seats of the kings who were with him in Babylon. So Jehoiakim put aside his prison clothes. Every day of his life he dined regularly in the king's presence. For his allowance, a regular allowance was given him by the king, a portion every day as long as he lived. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
And this is that very short story with which 1st and 2nd Kings, the history of the kings of Israel and Judah, ends. The last several dentists that I've gone to have all said to me, "John, you grind your teeth a lot." And then they would add, of course, I'm not saying that in a critical kind of way, because a lot of people grind their teeth, and said, I grind mine, and then they'd lean over and show me what a ground dentist's tooth looks like. A dentist can really tell a lot about us, and by just simply looking into our mouths and seeing how we treat our teeth, especially during the nighttime hours when apparently we deal with a lot of our frustrations by chomping in one way or another. We approach a lot of life with gritted teeth. There's a lot in life that invites us to grit our teeth because there are hard things to be handled, and we get wound up a little tight, and we take it to bed with us, and we grind away all night, and get up and put a little grit on, and go out and do it again. What does that mean? It means that we live our lives at least a little bit on edge. And I don't think most of us would deny that. The other thing that's true is that we're never at our best when we're approaching life through gritted teeth. You've got to wonder if there's not some correlation between things like grinding teeth and high blood pressure. I'm sure somebody's run a study. We're not at our best when we try to practice our faith through gritted teeth. Gritted teeth may be a fact of life, but it's not the best state to be in, and it requires some of our attention every so often. So what's the best way to be in life? It's to be in touch with our humanness and not in lockjaw, stressed out mode. That's what I want us to think about this morning for a few minutes. Being in touch with our humanness and the difference that it makes in what happens in our lives. This little story at the end of 2nd Kings involves a king of Babylon about whom we know very little. And it involves a Jewish king about whom we know very little. Now we know plenty about the Babylonian king's daddy. His name was Nebuchadnezzar, and he really established the Babylonian Empire as the greatest land empire in the world up to that time. And he was king of that empire for 43 years. accomplished a lot in his life. One of the interesting things about Nebuchadnezzar is that he was involved with two edifices that were considered wonders of the ancient world. One of them he tore down. It was Solomon's temple in Jerusalem. The other one was the Hanging Gardens of Babylon that he built. He married a girl from way off up in the mountains. And she missed her mountains. And he was down there on that flat, sandy, rocky plain. And she said, "Honey, will you buy me a house in the mountains?" I said, "I so miss it." And he said, "Well, the mountains are too far away. I'll just build you a mountain." And he built a mountain. We don't know how many stories high, but it was terraced and was covered with all sorts of trees and shrubs. Wouldn't you like to have been the nursery that had the contract on that job? Early on, the Hebrew people made a bad decision. They decided to buck Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the Hebrew people had the Lord God Jehovah to guide them. And he sent prophets in a regular kind of way to represent his point of view. And he told his people, listen to these prophets because they're going to help you understand what my will is in the circumstances that you're caught in. But the Hebrews always seemed to be itching to get into Middle Eastern politics, and they had an uncanny ability to pick the losing side. They were good at picking the losing side, and they always paid a price. Nebuchadnezzar was the most powerful ruler who had ever lived. He had the most powerful army the world has ever seen. He came over and he cleaned their clock. And he destroyed parts of Jerusalem. He made the temple unusable. He wrecked it. He took all the treasure. He took all the leadership of that nation and carries it off to Babylon. And the king, he locks up, gives him a jail suit, and puts him in prison, and there he is for 37 years. Now, the records are sketchy, but some other ancient sources outside the Bible give us an idea of what may have happened. Nebuchadnezzar's oldest son did something disloyal that caused his father to think, maybe I can't trust the heir to the throne. And so he had him locked up in prison for a while. And there, Nebuchadnezzar's son met this Jewish king who struck him as a pretty real person. He liked him. And which is a compliment to say about any king in those days, because most of them were tyrants, no matter what country they ruled. Now, Nebuchadnezzar's son was named Evil Merodach. I just love that, don't you? Evil Merodach. How would you like to go through life with a name like that? Apparently, the Jewish king who was locked up made an impression on him. He struck him as real. And there was something about that that he liked. It's a rare quality in those days among any rulers who, once you became king of anything, you became sort of a minor god, at least in your own mind, and generally became very difficult to deal with. Now, Evil Merodach gets out of prison. His dad forgives him and restores him to his place as heir to the throne. And years later, Nebuchadnezzar dies, and Evil Merodach is made king of the Babylonian Empire. He's finally arrived at against all the odds. And here he is, King of the universe, King of Babylon. People bowed down and they scraped, and they literally threw themselves prostrate on the floor until they were told that they could stand up. Why? Well, because that kind of a king held your fate with the wiggle of his little finger. He could do this, and they would take you out back and shoot you. And nobody would ever see you again. King of the universe. He's on top. He's got it made. What's one of the first things he does? He remembers the Jewish king has been locked up, and he remembers that there's something special about him. And he appreciates that. And so he sends for him, takes him out of prison, gives him something better than a prison suit to wear, gives him a nice allowance to live on, and not only restores him to the outside world, makes him a member of the court who sits at the king's table for the rest of his natural life. How does this happen? Well, evil Merodach, against all odds, somehow got in touch with his humanness. And it made him a better person. Think about that. Here's the point. The things in life that keep us from being fully human are the things that drive us apart, the likes and dislikes we have that cause conflict, the disagreements, and from that there comes a them versus us attitude and divisions that cause all sorts of those walls to go up between us. And in that kind of a setting, with those kind of thought processes, you can't be in touch with your humanness. The humanness is the one thing we have in common. And if we're not in touch with it, we really don't have much basis for being in touch with one another. Sure, we have differences. Some of them are significant, some of them are pretty minor. But at the core, we're all human. Ancestry.com. Send your $100 off and your swab, and they will tell you what percentage this and that and the other you are. What Ancestry.com cannot tell you is that if you trace the gene pool back far enough, it winds up in creation, at creation, in the hands of God. And when that becomes important to us, then all the other differences become less important, and the bones of contention that are always getting in the way between people have a way, they don't go away, but they get balanced by the understanding that because of our humanness, we're all in it together. Jesus made it clear that our relationships with each other out this way are a critical part of our relationship with God. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. That's up and down. And your neighbor as yourself. That's out this way. And where that line meets, up and down between us and God individually, and where the line meets between our neighbors and us and God, we're at the junction of where those two lines meet. And if we're at that junction and we're aware that's where we are, that's when the good things can happen in our lives. If we're off of where those two lines intersect, then going to be harder. When Jesus confronted the mob that was about to stone the woman who'd been caught in adultery, how did he handle it? He said, "Let the one among you who is without sin, let him cast the first stone." Now, we've mostly assumed, whenever we've looked at that passage, and I certainly have as a preacher, that what he did was he made them feel guilty. He shamed them. He tricked them. He manipulated them psychologically. And I've always thought that. What I think more now is that maybe beyond playing a little psychological game with them and winning one-upsmanship, that he put them in touch with their humanness. And that's one of the central truths about our humanness. Well, that we are all guilty, not just someone over there and someone over there, but me too. We're all in it together because we're all human, and part of being human is being guilty. Guilty in different ways, but guilty is guilty. Sin abounds, but so does grace. And it's when we understand that sin abounds in different ways in all of our lives that we're able to let grace that's abounding have its effect on us. So I look at that story of Jesus and the mob. And what I'm thinking now, at this point in my life, is that he laid it out to them and dropped the suggestion, well, okay, you caught her in adultery, she's guilty, so let the one who's without guilt throw the first stone. And the mob thinks it over, and there's no record that there's any kind of a group discussion or any kind of an uproar, but that just one by one, they take the stones that are in their hands and they let them drop to the ground, and they walk quietly away. Here's the possibility that getting in touch with their humanness changed the scene there on the ground. Jesus didn't have to shame them. He just put them in touch with who they were, and that changed everything. A clenched fist with a rock in it is very different when it becomes a hand and the rock falls out of it. That's the difference between the way we live too often and the way we need to live. Gritted teeth are kind of like a clenched fist. We are so frustrated about so many things, and we miss the good things sometimes, and we make things worse that didn't need to be worse simply because we're dealing with life through gritted teeth. I like to think that with that mob, when they all understood who they were, human, guilty in different ways, but guilty, and let those rocks drop to the ground, that it was somehow not a moment when Jesus had gotten the best of them. But when Jesus had put them in touch with their humanness, and it became a sacred moment for them, a sacred moment for the woman who had been caught in adultery. And here's the point. That sacred moments are so much more likely to happen in our lives when we approach God and we approach one another in an unpretentious human mode. And when we stand before God and acknowledge who we are in a human kind of way, that's when we're in a position for God to do some things with us this way. And when we take that approach with the people around us, that's when God, working through us and other people, can get things done out to the left and the right. It's this way. It's this way. And if there's a common acknowledgement that everybody who's in that picture is a human, a real person, instead of someone with whom we may have a disagreement, someone who thinks differently than we are, someone who maybe ought to be locked up, then God can do things that give us hope that the words that Jesus taught us to say in the Lord's Prayer may have a chance of coming more true than sometimes we think. Thy will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. So think human. And when you look at the people around you, think human instead of making quick judgments. And that is the fertile ground that the kingdom grows. Maybe not a lot, but at least a little in the places where we live and work and play. Amen.